Welcome to Psychological Explorations with Dr. Michael Axelman.
And Daniela.
And John.
Today we'll be focusing on Kalman Kaplan's book, Tilt, Teaching Individuals to Live Together, which came out in 1998. And we'll focus on his introductory chapter, The Problem of Psychological Distance, a distinction between walls and boundaries. I had the good fortune of working with Cal Kaplan for a year while I was in Chicago doing training. And I participated in this project that became the book Tilt. And a little bit later in the presentation, I'll talk about some case material from that project and look forward to having an interesting discussion today about this process of being the individual and being together, being yourself and being with other people. Cal Kaplan, just before we get started, worked out of University of Illinois at Chicago, Wayne State University. Prior to Michael Reese Hospital closing in Chicago, he was on the faculty of Michael Reese. So look into Cal Kaplan. He has books in many areas. He's an expert on kind of suicide, as well as biblical psychology, family and couples. And he's written extensively on the whole idea of hope, the conception of hope. Cal Kaplan. So he puts forth this idea of two separate dimensions of interpersonal distance: individuation and attachment, where individuation is the distance to oneself, the capacity to differentiate oneself from another, and attachment, the distance from the other and the capacity to reach out to another. So nearness may indicate attachment. However, it may also indicate de-individuation, enmeshment. And farness in this model may indicate individuation. However, it may also indicate detachment, disengagement. So as we move more deeply into this model, we introduce this idea of walls and boundaries. Walls exist to keep others out. And according to the model, right, they can be permeable, moderately permeable, or impermeable. And boundaries exist to keep the self in. And these boundaries can be articulated, moderately articulated, or inarticulated. So don't confuse the loosening of walls, okay, this permeability, with the loosening of boundaries, okay, de-individuating. And don't confuse erecting walls, right, detaching, with establishing boundaries, individuating. So when we're working with our clients, we're thinking along these two dimensions. Kaplan developed an individuation attachment questionnaire, and I'm going to share a few of the key items from that questionnaire so you get a flavor of what we're going to be listening for. You know, for example, if somebody has fear of independent thought, feeling, or action, they'll endorse terms like, I try to avoid being on my own. I tend to speak softly in public. I let people I respect shape my decisions. As opposed to the need for independent thought, feeling, or action, I don't hesitate to fight for my own opinions with people I'm close to. I don't feel guilty when I oppose my friends. If I'm not for myself, I cannot expect anyone else to be. So, this need to express this independent thought, feeling, or action, the fear of togetherness, fear of cooperation with others in thought, feeling, and action. Some of the key terms: being close in relationship often keeps one from doing what they want to do. I prefer to not get too close to others. If I open myself up to others, I'll get hurt. And the need for cooperation, the need for this affiliation, connection with others' thought, feeling, or action. The best part of parties is the chance to make new friends. Relating to others is essential to coming to know yourself. You're not worth much if you're only focused on your own concerns. So we have these fears and these needs that get expressed. When I was working on this project, while I was still in training, I worked with a family as part of the project, a single mother with an adolescent daughter. It was just the two of them. And the adolescent daughter was trying to kind of assert her own independence separate from the mother. They were a very close dyad through the child years, and now adolescence was creating this individuation separation process. The daughter was very involved with this music band, and she liked to wear their shirts. And on the shirts, they had pictures that the mom didn't like, and the mom didn't want her to wear this clothing, especially if they were together in public. She didn't want to be seen and have other parents who she knew see her with her daughter wearing this shirt. The daughter identified with wearing this shirt as such an important part of herself. This is who she is. This is who she wants to be. And this was a key conflict that came up in one of the sessions. And through this model, we were to help the mother understand this is part of the individuation process of becoming her own person, and help the daughter understand that mom doesn't feel comfortable being close to her when she presents herself in this way. It creates this distance. And ultimately, through the work we did together, and this was just kind of one example of it, but the mom agreed that it would be okay for the daughter to keep the shirt on and just put another sweatshirt on top of it when they were in public. And the daughter was able to keep on the shirt that she wanted to keep on, part of her own individuation. So they found this kind of compromise, a way to be themselves and be connected. And I found that to be a really useful model to help this parent-child dyad move through this phase in development. And at this point, I'm curious, hearing from Danielle and John, what your thoughts are about, reading this chapter and kind of reflecting on this idea of boundaries and walls, individuation and connection and togetherness. Yes, please.
I really like your example because growing up, I had a similar situation with my mother, but what she would do is when she did laundry, she would throw my shirts away. And then when I would say, hey, has anybody seen my shirt? She would say, I don't know what happened to your shirt.
Oh,
And I remember like getting so upset and angry. And it wasn't until I became somewhat of an adult that I started to understand what had happened, because my little sister and my older sister told me, do you remember when mom used to throw away your shirts? And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, remember how all your shirts would go missing? I said, yeah. She's like, well, mom was throwing them away.
Oh, wow.
And
Oh, wow.
she was just gaslighting me. She's like, I don't know where your shirts are.
Oh.
Maybe you left them at school, or maybe you're gonna put them in your bag after water polo practice. Oh my goodness.
Individuation struggle.
The
Oh,
individuation
yes.
struggle. You know, I work with a lot of first generation students, and I see this occur when they are going off to college, and the individuation struggle becomes around surpassing the parent in their own individuality. And it's so difficult. I remember one of the first times I was working with a student who had, at this point, had graduated from college, was sort of getting ready on the job hunt, had been interviewing across a lot of different places to try and find the right place. And the mother, because the mother, you know, came to this country in her later 20s or early 20s, and is in the kind of precarious situation where you have to take the job that you can get. The mother couldn't understand why her child was not taking just the first job, why the child was, you know, really thinking about carefully and intentionally, where do I want to be, and where can I sort of do my career, and what's the right fit for me. And the client that I was working with at the time was really struggling with this idea, and sort of how I reflected some of this back to her is she actually has choice. Her mother didn't have choice.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really difficult process for her, between like stepping away from the mother, and the mother sort of saying, take the first job you can get because you don't know what's next. And the student saying, the client saying, right, I don't want to do that. And should I be doing that? And it was really difficult for her to come into this place of, I actually have a choice.
Yes.
So I see the individuation process. I see it a lot. I have so many examples of everything that you've talked about with walls and boundaries. But I'll give John some space to talk, but I have so many examples.
Oh, we like to hear from them down the road. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really important topic today because, and this may just be the result of like, you know, the availability kind of heuristic of, you know, what you hear on the media or through the media. But, you know, I have noticed over, you know, the years recently, a lot of talk of family separations, of family estrangement, of children cutting their parents off. This is like a kind of growing trend among younger generations, you know, which is to kind of cut their families off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's interesting about this paper, right, is that I think people have this idea that if you cut your family off and you go off on your own, it's a sign of like mental health in a lot of cases, that, you know, it's and in some cases it may be absolutely important to you know, in cases of abuse, neglect, you know, just there, we can imagine situations where, you know, cutting yourself off from your family may be absolutely, you know, necessary. But in other cases where it's just kind of like, you know, family discord is sort of like the history there, and it's just kind of, there's tension, there's discomfort, and people kind of, I think, forget. And I think what's great about this chapter is he says, you know, you can't confuse, you know, don't confuse you know, having really strong impenetrable walls with like individuation necessarily. You know, like it's, you know, it may be the case that you're highly individuated and you need to kind of be away from, you know, others, you know, that may be kind of a personal circumstance, but it also may be the case that you have these really rigid, you know, powerful impenetrable walls, which is not always a sign of, you know, like health necessarily. And so I think, you know, because I certainly know people who think like, oh, you know, yeah, I cut my family off, I don't need, you know, those, they're out of my life. Like, but they're clearly like, there's still like this sort of fusion to them, that they're not like quite differentiated or individuated, that they're still very much fused to the family.
I've got a great example of this.
But yeah, I like how he brings a lot of nuance to this discussion. where it's not so simple. It's not like kind of in the Minutian sort of unidimensional. You either, you know, enmeshed, or it's, you know, or you're in rigid boundaries or enmeshed boundaries or whatever. It's
Right now.
it's this bidimensional view is, it really kind of opens it up quite a bit more. It brings a lot more nuance, which I think is needed.
I can share a great example of a time when I actually said to not a client, but my teen staff, where I work is after school and it's really youth led. And so I have a teen staff that helps me out with mental health initiatives at the clubhouse. And I once told her that she was setting up walls and these weren't boundaries. And I'll just share quickly what that was like, because I think it really highlights what John's saying, is that the student was working with a young therapist, a therapist that had just graduated from college. And I think they were also trying to figure out this idea. And for them, this idea of boundaries was cutting people off, right? And so this student, I had to do something at the clubhouse with one of the friends of the student, my teen staff. And the teen staff did not agree with my choice. And the choice was we had to call the parents because her friend came to the clubhouse completely intoxicated.
Mhm.
And so we had to call the parents just to let them know and to get the child home safely. And the teen staff was furious with our decision because the teen staff felt that she could have handled the situation. This is also a student who is extremely like hyper individualistic. I don't need anybody. I can't rely on it. No one's going to help me, kind of a
Mhm.
talking about here. So she was completely disappointed with my decision. And I reflected that back to her, how disappointed and angry she was with me. And there was no resolution at the time. She was still so angry. The weekend passed. We met for our one-on-one. And there was also another staff there. And this staff member was the mentor of the student that I manage. And the mentor and I both had to make this call. And so she was upset with both of us. And the mentor was transitioning to a new clubhouse because she got a promotion. And she wasn't talking to the mentor. She was just like saying hi and then walking away as quickly as possible. And she's doing the same with me. And in our one-on-one, she sits down and she says to me, "The only kind of relationship I want with you is staff and employee and boss." And I said to her, I said, "Well, that's just not going to work for me. That's not how I like to work with my employees." And she's like, "Daniela, I'm just setting up boundaries." And I said, "Oh, here's where you're confused." I said, "You think that this is a boundary when what you're really doing is you're putting up a wall." And she looked at me and then she kind of started to laugh. And then we sort of talked it through. And then after our session, or our one-on-one, I should say, the mentor came to me and said, "I don't know what you said to the student, but her and I were able to sit down, and she told me that she's been putting up walls this whole time and not setting up boundaries, and she's ready to say goodbye to me." And it was this really cool moment. But to John's point, right, is that the therapist that she was working with before had somehow, I think, confused the two. And the way in which she was helping the client come up with boundaries was by putting up walls. And when I was able to reflect this back to the student, it really resonated with her. And I'll tell you, since then, she's starting to be more open to the idea of maybe it's okay to need somebody.
Mhm.
And she's softened a little bit. And it was just a great example of me actually using these words with the student.
Awesome. Great example.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, so often we'll see this in the clothing choice,
Uh-huh.
especially like the hoodie comes up,
Oh my goodness. In 90-degree weather.
right? You can see somebody just will not be able to take the hoodie down. And it really does suggest this poor differentiation, right? This inability to articulate the self in any clear way. And the wall comes up.
Yes.
And work really needs to be around the individuation first with these types of clients, rather than trying to work on the relational aspect. Once there's more clarity and individuation, then the relationship becomes possible in a new way.
Right. No, and what's really interesting about this student too is in that same discussion where I sort of brought the walls and boundaries up, at some point we had gotten off topic and we're talking about more personal things. And she goes, "Oh, Danielle, I just want to talk about work." And I said, "Okay, no problem. Let's get back to what our agenda." And she goes, "Wait, you're not going to ask me more about my personal life?" And I was like, "No, you set up a good boundary. You said you just want to talk about work in our one-on-one. I'm respecting that." And she was just shocked, just absolutely shocked. So it's just another sort of example of this. The individuation is the most important part first. You know, if she can actually do that and set those boundaries.
Yes. Yes.
You know.
You know, the model applies as well to couples work. You know, more recently, I came across a couple who the wife was working in kind of a mid-level job and felt primarily dependent on her husband, who was the primary caretaker and provider of her. And there was dependency kind of set up in the marriage. And she got a promotion at work and moved into a management position, which really enhanced her sense of self and her capacity to individuate herself in the marriage. And just from this promotion, the marriage itself improved tremendously. Yeah. Again, with the individuation opening up possibilities for new ways of relating.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I think what's most interesting to me about this, right, is that it's an external force having a positive impact in this relationship. Interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the bidimensional model that he presents in this chapter is really could be a very useful assessment kind of tool for clinicians working with couples or individuals, just kind of trying to figure out where they are in these, you know, on these dimensions. And that could be just a really kind of practical way to start conceptualizing where, you know, where the relational problems might be. And then you, like you said, it's kind of, then it kind of indicates maybe where you need to go. Maybe you need to work on the individuation first. And, you know, so I really enjoyed it. You know, so as a student right now, I'm still in school and I'm taking a couples counseling class this quarter. And
you're working with young adults.
And I'll be interested, in kind of applying it to some of that work. I found it very interesting and useful.
Yeah, he identifies what I guess he calls the most problematic, right, marital dyad, where one of them is organized by a need for attachment, right, and the other is organized by a fear. And when that comes up, the fear to attach and the need to attach, the children are almost always going to be left feeling kind of insecure about their place in the world. And there's really no healthy model that's available to them of relating.
Interesting. Yeah.
So there's diagnostic value. Yes, I think these two dimensions really offer that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it, you know, becomes interesting to think about how, you know, some of the early developmental history and attachment, you know, informs and influences our ability to individuate, and where maybe some of that didn't happen. And whereas clinicians, you can kind of work to fill in some of those missing parts.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in this model, to say the least.
Yes.
You worked with him directly. Was he influenced by sort of like Winnicottian theory?
I think he was most interested in like the movement of transactional psychology, which was kind of like a neighbor of psychoanalysis.
Yeah.
Kind of that transactional, but very much a relationally focused perspective.
Okay. They don't really talk too much about the transactional anymore. I was at the thrift store a while back and I bought some books. I think somebody was like an old analyst or something like that. But I found some books on transactional psychology and I was like, I've never heard of this before. But it looked really interesting. So I picked him up. But before that, I hadn't really heard of it.
Yes. Yeah, it works a lot about kind of relational scripts and the way that we kind of play out these scripts. Much of it unconscious.
Okay.
And he's applied these theories also to kind of suicide, and other topics, where individuation or poor individuation will make the idea of suicide as a solution you look appealing.
I see.
One
Yeah.
doesn't see any ways to be themselves and be in connection with the people in their environment, right? It can lead to that sense of hopelessness.
Oh my. That we should probably do a discussion on that too. That sounds really interesting and something that comes up so much with teenagers, at least in my and sort of, I've worked with teenagers for the last 5 years. Exactly what you said is what the thoughts of like, wanting to end one's life are so directly connected to that. With teens often.
Oh, absolutely. It's a key factor.
Yes.
Yeah, so once you can establish individuation, right, with that co-occurs this sense that you have value, you have worth.
Mm-hmm. And that others do too, huh?
Absolutely. Yes. So the visual, right? The boundary is just, the way states have boundaries. You just drive across them on the highway and you just know, like, you just cross from one state to another.
Right.
Right.
I'll go
On
back.
the southern border, they're building a wall, right? Which is a very different thing with respect to movement and possibility, right?
Right.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting like metaphor he used too, is like the skin itself is like the boundary. I think in the chapter he talks about how, boundaries are meant to keep the self in. So then he talks about,
Yes.
the skin itself is kind of the boundary, but then like a band-aid or something, on it is meant to keep things out. And I thought, yeah, that was kind of just a useful way of distinguishing between them.
Yes.
Of keeping the self in, keeping others out. And yeah, what an important time that we're living in now for this kind of approach to living together, or trying to live together.
I know people are getting canceled left and right, huh?
Yes.
So seems very timely and important.
Yeah, it's like the core key issue, right? How do we be ourselves and be in relation with other people? Right? This is the project of life. And I do agree that this model does really offer a kind of a new perspective and a new rubric for making sense of the problem of psychological distance.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for joining us today for our presentation of Cal Kaplan's introductory chapter to Tilt, Teaching Individuals to Live Together. Please join us in the future for future presentations. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.